Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Welcome to this episode of the Excellence at Work podcast from Brandon Hall Group. I'm your host, David Wentworth. I'm the Managing Director for Learning and Talent here at Brandon Hall Group, and I am joined by Adam Thompson, who is the Chief Product Officer for Confirm. Adam, welcome.
Great to be here with you, Dave.
I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk about something that I've grown very fond of over the last few years, really focusing on a specific segment of, learners, of a certain segment of the learning ecosystem here around the frontline workers, right? And this phrase has gained a lot of popularity over the last few years. I mean, they've always been around, but I think we've just gotten a really unique, grown focus on this group because they inhabit a world that has a lot of specific challenges, a lot of very specific complexity that is different than what we've traditionally talked about whenever we talk about this generic learner, right? This generic audience. I think of it in our research at Brandon Hall Group over the years, when we refer to an organization, 80% of organizations do X, Y, Z. People's minds immediately go to a bunch of people sitting at desks with computers in front of them. And that's what people think of when they think organization and workers. And the reality is the vast majority of workers are walking around. They're in a store, they're on a shop floor, they're the frontline workers. They are not sitting at that desk. And so a lot of the things that we've thought about and the way we've approached things have just not been aimed in the right direction. So I'd love to sit and unpack some of this with you today. So first of all, like when we say frontline workers, who do you think of? Like, what do you guys come to mind when you're talking about this?
Sure. So to me, frontline worker ranges all the way from people that work in hospitality, so restaurants, hotels. Mm-hmm. It would be retail workers, logistics workers, folks that work in warehouses. It would certainly also apply to people in healthcare. So nurses, primary care technicians, people that work for airlines. So flight attendants, people that work in cargo. I would stretch it as far as to say people that are bank tellers, people that work inside of contact centers. All of that to me would encompass frontline. And there's 2.7 billion frontline workers in the world. It's about 60% of the US working population. I live in London, by the way. I live in the UK, and here in the UK, it's about the same. It's about 60% of the UK population would be classified as a frontline.
Mm. And I think it's also interesting to, as you note, that you can't get blinders on, because when you think frontline, immediately you also think customer facing, which yes, restaurant, hospitality, there's there, but also, that shop floor, that manufacturing, the frontline, hands on the product, that kind of thing, that incorporates them as well. And they all have their unique challenges. So speaking of challenges, that's sort of, I think there's a lot of challenges facing organizations today generally. So what does that look like through the lens of the frontline worker? What specific kinds of challenges and issues are these workers facing?
Gosh, there's a ton. If I start one level up, if you don't mind, like what's happening with the businesses themselves. So 45% of restaurants are not profitable right now. It's absolutely crazy. It's about 50% of retail locations are earning less than 2% profit margins right now. It's a brutal space today. They're under a lot of cost pressures today from things like transportation costs are increasing, labor costs have significantly increased since the pandemic. They're up about 30% globally. Food costs have gone up, while at the same time, shoppers, a lot of us are under a cost of living crisis. I think that's also a bit of a global trend, and that makes it difficult for retailers and restaurants to pass on those increased costs to their customer base. And there's a lot of evolving business models right now. We're seeing ghost kitchens continue to pop up. I'm probably going to order pizza for my kids for dinner tonight, and it will probably be from a ghost kitchen that's nearby. A lot of contactless models are also popping up, where you've got to have a lot of folks that can stock the shelves and do the merchandising, but maybe not the cashiers themselves. So we're seeing a lot of evolution of business models. And the way that is flowing through to the workforce is the profitability is going to have to come from more efficiency. And that is a difficult thing to say, to a group of workers that are already under a lot of pressure.
Mm.
But I would say some of the things that are specifically impacting them, it's too many tools, too many different logins. So there's a lot of friction that gets introduced to their day. And this is a group that has to get the insights, the knowledge, the tasks, understanding put to them within minutes. Not they don't have time to sit behind a desk and figure it out on their own time. Productivity gets measured pretty harshly in some spaces. So that's one thing that jumps out. We're also seeing increased turnover within a lot of organizations. And part of that is coming from frontline workers not feeling like they have a good understanding of how they can grow their careers within some of these frontline organizations. When I think a lot of them would tell you there are great career paths there. Store managers can make great, that's a great career. Being a warehouse manager can become a great career, et cetera. But I think the entry level and kind of mid-level workforce don't always see how they can maneuver themselves to reach those opportunities. So those would be a bunch of examples that come to top of mind for me.
Well, right. And thinking, if you think about it, increasing turnover in a space where turnover is already
High.
Insanely high.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking especially like a retail restaurant, it can be 100% over the course of a year. And these are people that we need to get in, and then they want to get them up to speed quickly too, because of that environment. And sometimes we end up, focusing on that and trying to put out those fires, like, okay, replace and get them up to speed, replace, as opposed to, hey, how do we develop people, give them more opportunities so maybe the turnover isn't so rapid,
exactly,
so fast. So yeah, I think that's a critical issue, especially given all the things that you're describing. That is something that the organization actually can have some control over, right? A lot of these things you're sort of having to just, okay, this is the environment we're in, we have to deal with it. But that's something that you could actually have control over, is how do we address these workers and get them to want to stay.
Somebody, a customer of ours, put it to me in a really interesting way recently, and I thought it was just so insightful. She said that they actually think about it through a build by partner model, which as somebody in product, that's a concept that I live and breathe. And what she was describing is, in the nursing world, the U.S. is predicted to have a shortage of about 500,000 nurses by 2030. In the UK, the National Health Service is also under just a tremendous amount of pressure right now. So they could try to buy the talent, which effectively means talent acquisition. It does a better job to try to poach from other places, but there's a finite pool. They could try to partner for the talent, which is basically, let's kind of reach into the value chain and partner with nursing schools and try to get them early, or they could build the talent themselves. And in a lot of these situations, I think you're going to end up having to build the talent. So I think we're going to see more investment going into talent enablement and kind of the building of talent in a world where the labor markets are getting tight.
Well, and I think, as far as our conversation goes, the current environment is, somewhat unique, and there's been a lot of changes, but the DNA of a frontline organization, or an organization with frontline workers, hasn't necessarily changed all that much. And the technology that is available, as fast as technology is moving, hasn't changed that dramatically. So then the question becomes, why now? And this is not just us talking about it in this podcast. I know from my own work that this conversation comes up time and time again. How do we rethink the way we handle a frontline worker? So what's going on right now, given that sort of all the tools that are available to us have been available to us? Why is the conversation so important right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons why it's so important right now. And I come back to that list of challenges that I said a bit earlier. When you are under tremendous cost pressure, you have to show profitability, and you cannot pass costs onto your customer base. You're forced to find operational efficiencies. So that means tool consolidation. That means enabling workers faster. That means trying to hold on to them longer. And it means making them more effective in their roles. That's the path to profitability today. And I think if we look at one of those paths, you're right, the tools haven't changed that much. Performance management, employee engagement software, learning management systems, those are concepts that have existed since, I don't know, maybe the 80s. They've been around for a while. They've evolved a bit since then, but they've certainly been around for a while. But those are typically seen as three distinct systems. Those are three friction points instead of one consolidated system. So your data is fragmented, your employees' experiences are fragmented, and likely your overhead costs is higher than it could be because you're working with three separate vendors.
Yeah. And well, not just that, I think companies are recognizing that, the interoperability of all of those things has always sort of existed, because at the end of the day, we're talking about people, and that's how people live and breathe inside the organization. It's all of those things, but they've been handled, the accountability, the government has always been very discreet, right? Like, well, we need someone to own this process, and by doing that, it starts to close the process in around itself, and then they all become these very discrete processes, and all of a sudden an organization is faced with a challenge, and they're like, okay, here's our challenge. Can we hire our way through it? And then they try, okay, well, let's see if we can develop our way through it.
That's right.
Instead of what is the combination of all of these things. And we know it from here at Brandon Hall as we try to do our research. Conceptually, everyone gets it, right? But then when you start to dig in and you want to ask even research survey questions, like, well, I can answer these questions, but I can't answer these questions because I don't have insight into that. And so it's really difficult to break out of that. And so what are some of the ways that you're sort of talking to the companies that you work with to sort of get their minds open to this concept and how to actually, like I said, they get it when you say it. What are some of the things you walk through to help them sort of put it into practice?
One of the big ways, and it is helping them think about a reframing of L&D roles, HRBP roles, transformation roles within the business. So the way that I think about it today, let me actually take a half a step back. If I think about a good paradigm, I actually think a sales enablement role is a pretty good paradigm. Sales enablement, that is somebody who is embedded within a sales organization, who is responsible for their learning, the engagement, and the performance of that sales team. And they typically are very well married up to folks in revenue operations and to sales leaders. When I look at HR departments, though, it's fragmented. So you'll have L&D who are responsible for overall learning within the workforce and whose KPI typically is in completions and completion percentages. You can have a ton of course completions while your business is going down. So it's actually not a very good KPI. If I think about HRBPs, and there's a lot of fantastic HRBPs out there, but often that is an advisory role. It's not a role that tends to help equip your team with the tools they need to help make them more performant. And then if I think about transformation roles, they're crafted in lots of different ways, but those are typically point in time project-based roles. So what I think we need to see is the emergence of a talent enablement department that merges those three concepts together with KPI that tie them deeply to the business units that they serve and that help drive the learning, the engagement, and the performance of the business unit that they're partnered with. So I think those three roles need to get melded together in the same way that we saw the rise of like a go-to-market engineer in the revenue space.
Yeah, it's interesting you pull up the concept around like the sales enablement role. And I think very often sales is a great sort of laboratory for a lot of the things that the broader learning ecosystem can do because it's so outcome focused, right? I mean, there's a clear set of data that we track. This is working, this isn't, but we don't treat other segments like that. But it's the same thing as, well, okay, this group of people, you need them to do certain things in a certain way in order to be successful. So it isn't necessarily about, it isn't learning, it's the business. It's
exactly right.
We're trying
exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly how I think about it, Dave.
And so, yeah, how do we get folks who, not for in a negative way, have always looked at things from the other side of the coin, more just, to start thinking about it in those terms. I mean, I know that the idea of, I think the more that you and others can talk through the ways those three things work together, and how they should work together, I think is critically important. But most companies, the people, the processes, and the technology they have are not together. They're completely non-integrated.
Yeah. There's a lot of fragmentation there. But what I would say is, if I was an HR leader, what I see and what I fear for HR is that HR is continuing to lose voice at the table and is losing budget to COO, CIOs, CFOs. And it's getting harder to defend new hires. It's getting harder to defend continuing to grow your tech stack. And if I was an individual that's in L&D or an HRBP, those roles are diminishing. A lot of organizations have slashed their L&D and HRBP headcounts. And I know a lot of folks are trying to find net new roles. I think this is the time to push to up-level HR.
Yeah. Well, I think, the approach, even we talk about sales enablement. Okay, let's take that one step further and talk about, entire workforce enablement. Why are we not enabling the entire workforce?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So like, how does that look in a company if they were doing it right? What does workforce enablement look like?
So funny lead in. What we've actually rebranded ourselves to as a category is a workforce enablement system. We feel that is, we're not the only ones doing it. By the way, there's a couple of we've seen a couple of other I think future looking competitors that are moving in the same space, and I've heard from a few analysts that they're thinking similarly. But I think that is the wave of the future. And if I had to break it down from I'll start with the technology view, and then maybe I could move into maybe a practical case if it's helpful. From a practical view, I look at kind of the two anchor points of your HR tech ecosystem. It's always been the ATS and the HCM, right? And each of those have consolidated the different tools under their umbrellas. So that's why if you look at your talent acquisition colleagues, their applicant tracking system now has behavioral assessments incredibly well integrated. They've got interview scheduling tools, recorded video interview technology. They've got lots of algorithms to help them spot the candidates that are the best fit. So all of those tools are under one umbrella. And a lot of those talent acquisition processes now feel more seamless for candidates. I think the parallel here for the rest of the workforce are things like learning management systems, internal communications, knowledge bases. In the frontline world, I would stretch it to shift scheduling, maybe even payroll, employee engagement tools, performance management tools. All of those that are individual fragmented pieces, I think they all need to be in the same umbrella. They need to be in one ecosystem. And that's going to make your employees' lives easier. That's going to give you the connective tissue to have stronger automations, stronger AI-based intelligence and recommendations and insights. And ultimately, it'll also save you a buck because you're going to do vendor consolidation as part of it.
For sure.
And then if I was to look at a real practical method, there's a UK steakhouse that's got about 30 locations. And there's actually somebody who's in a talent enablement role there. And they had about 3 or 4 locations that were performing amazingly. They had 5 or 6 that were struggling. She actually goes to each of those locations. She goes into the high performing locations. She sees what they're doing right. Who are the superstars that are shining? Goes to the poor performing locations, finds out where are they struggling and what are kind of the best cases from the high performing ones, what are the worst cases from the poor performing ones, and then make sure that gets shared across that entire ecosystem. And I think that we should be looking at ways to help frontline organizations do that at scale. And if I was in talent enablement or in that kind of emerging role, that's the kind of paradigm that I would be pushing for.
Yeah. Because just by definition, that's one of the vagaries of the frontline workforce is they're very typically dispersed and
Exactly right.
co-located, and they don't communicate. And that's not a negative. That's just the way it's made. They don't communicate regularly with other places. And then you get even further down the line when you start to talk about franchises, right?
Yes.
So you have a restaurant or a retail, and they technically don't even work for the same company.
Yeah.
Even though they're operating under the same brand.
That's
and so
right.
you've now pushed them even further than arm's length.
That's right.
Yeah,
and you've got to be very careful with co-employment laws in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, but the idea that how do we capture, what's going right, what's going wrong, in a way that works across these sort of very dispersed companies is very important. I think also with the things that you're talking about, again, I talk to organizations all the time about the challenges they're facing. And you just bring up one word right now and you say skills. Everyone's talking about skills. It's probably maybe just below AI and the number of conversations I'm having, and usually at the same time. But the skills, and you're okay, and everyone's brain starts cranking on skills and what it means to them. But you look at, okay, we'll look at your processes in your organization. Skills. Are you hiring for skills? Probably. Are you trying to develop skills? Most likely. Are you trying to reallocate skills across the company in a different? Yes. So why aren't those things all working together so that you know where you are, what you have, and what you need to do? Because all of those individual discrete elements are hyper focused on skills, but they're not collaborating on how the organization is leveraging those skills.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will be I think I am a slight contrarian here.
Okay.
With the way that I've typically seen skills approached. I think that the concept of it, I'm with you. That is how we should be thinking about hiring. That is how we should be thinking about developing our employees, is based on the skills that they need. But I think if you introduce those really large, kind of difficult and unwieldy skills-based taxonomies, especially in the frontline world, I've seen it take years for people to implement those. And when I break it down, I'm sure you're probably familiar with ONET. ONET's got skills and skills taxonomies. They've got task taxonomies across every job. That's what the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US uses. I think that's too heavy. When I think about the front line, I think it typically boils down to somewhere around 3 to 7 capabilities per role. And there's just got to be an easier way to do it. So I'm not disagreeing with you fully. I have a bit of a reaction when I've seen so many companies go through these giant taxonomies,
Sure.
and I just want to apologize to them because I've built those products in the past too.
Yeah, and you're in no way actually disagreeing with me, because I don't disagree with that at all. Like, we've constantly here been over years trying to get people to rethink their approach to skills and don't spend a year building a skills taxonomy that's chiseled into concrete,
Yes,
that by the end of the year it's meaningless anyway.
different.
But you did
Yeah,
it, and now it exists.
yeah,
And yeah, and trust me, we've seen companies with, there's 12 skills, there's 30 skills, there's 45 skills associated with it. Okay, I don't know how you're going to manage that. And it is
exactly.
more about what are the capabilities of the people, when then what is the capability across all of the people, that you've got.
If I was going to give a skills-based recommendation to frontline organizations, I would say the most critical population that I hear people talking about constantly is the first-time manager. It's basically,
Mhm.
how do I get my next group of shift managers or assistant store managers or whatever that role might be titled for your organization? How do you identify that from kind of more the rank and file? And that's typically 6 things or so that you need to look for. Can they do these couple of tasks really well? Do they have kind of good performance reviews? Are they engaged? If yes, that's somebody that we need to talk to about that job opening. And I think that there's a faster way to cut through that.
Yeah, I hope so. And and identify people who have the potential there that might not even realize it.
That's right.
I think that's the key too. So, and well, one of the things I think that's helping companies do just that is some of the AI tools are allowing them to surface information and knowledge that wasn't really recognizable before. So, and you had brought it up before a little bit about AI. So let's just dive in there too, because we gotta peel that back for this
Sure.
particular conversation, right? So,
Yeah.
is there some unique wrinkle in these types of organizations for the AI discussion? Because I know broadly, I think
Yeah, I think so.
everything's relatively applicable, but then
Yeah,
are there any unique challenges?
I think there's 2 unique challenges. So I'm guessing, Dave, you're probably like me. I use Claude every day, multiple times a day. I live and breathe it. The entire R&D team uses it nonstop. That's not as true for the frontline workforce. They would have typically very little enablement or interaction with AI tools. So I think there needs to be some enablement for how this is applicable for frontline use cases. That needs to happen. And the frontline is more nervous than you could imagine around their jobs being displaced because of AI or automation. And I think there's been quite a bit of fear mongering around that. I don't think that we've actually seen that materialize in the job market yet for frontline workers at all. But I would get in front of that to basically say, hey, our goal, we still need you. We need you, the human. Atoms still have to be able to move across the shop floor. Material still has to move, and AI is not going to do that yet. The goal here is to help make you better, faster, more empowered. It's kind of like the Iron Man concept, not the Terminator concept, is the
Mhm.
way that I think about the analogy, Dave. And the other nuance here is that we all know AI at times can hallucinate. So if it was something around, does this food include a certain allergy? You have got to make sure any AI model that you have is effectively hallucination proof. And the way that I would do that is basically get an answer and then give the link to the actual codified answer from your SOPs. And so that they refer to the material, they don't take just an AI generated answer. That's critical in the restaurant world, that's critical in the healthcare world, and that's even critical in like the hotel world, where a result could end up costing the organization quite a lot of money, because if you say the wrong thing to a high value customer or you don't give the right discount, et cetera, that could end up having a pretty big impact on somebody's day. So more of a look up and find than here's exactly the right answer would be what I would lean to for most frontline use cases.
Well, I think this is a challenge for everybody, but it does become more acute in for this workforce. if the organization is sort of dragging its feet on what its approach to AI is going to be and what models they will use and how it's going to be used, chances are your workforce is already figuring out ways that they're going to use it, right? So you're going to ask a question,
That's true.
right? And so they're going to ask that question, and it's going to pull whatever responses it can find
Great
to
point.
whatever's available to it. If
Great
your
point.
SOP is not available to it, if that's gated off or if it's not included, then the proper information isn't available, or the thing that you want them to see first is not there. So we have to figure out what is our approach, how is our workforce asking questions, and make sure that the proper information is available to them.
Dave, it's just such a good point, because I mean, there's so much shadow usage.
Right.
So I think a lot of organizations are still afraid to implement AI. But if you don't provide the tool, they're still going to find a tool and they're going to use it without you knowing. And the cost of those mistakes is probably a lot greater than you implementing something that you are comfortable with as a business.
Yeah. And you can't expect that the frontline workers are going to just have that. Well, I know that this answer is coming from over here, and I'll take it with a grain of salt. That's not how they're using the tools, right? So the idea is to, you don't necessarily have to build your own little AI chatbot or whatever you have, but just have to understand what's the company's strategy and how are we allowing AI tools to access the information that we have.
Yep, completely agree.
But I think that's the other part too. You hit on something very important, and that we always try to touch on, is that human element is, you have to be aware that people are very wary, and my job's going on. And I think it's interesting. You even brought up a minute ago, in this type of workforce, you see things like kiosks instead of cashiers, and everyone's like, "Well, that's it. No more cashiers. All these jobs are going away." And I've spoken directly to the restaurants that do this kind of work, and other people who monitor those industries, and they're like, "Oh, that's not what happened at all. They didn't get rid of people at all. They gave people different jobs, and they had them focus on other things that were required a little bit more thinking, a little bit more strategy, as opposed to simply listening to a customer and inputting information that, and it's like they weren't doing it to say, oh, we don't need those people. It's like, we just need our people to do more better stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. But I have a lot of empathy for that frontline employee who can easily have that immediate reaction of, oh my gosh, I'm at risk. And when there's such a cost of living crisis, it can put people on edge. And so I certainly, I've been a dishwasher, I've been a bank teller, I've been a cashier at Target in the past. I've done a ton of those frontline roles, and I very well could have had some of the same reactions. So yeah, I would think over communication and kind of putting up the good news stories of the new jobs that are coming within your organization, the new roles that you're adding, how people are being able to level up. It's important to put those good news stories out to help assuage some of the fears.
Yeah. And I would say I still stand by this. I think everybody should do some time in a frontline. And I highly recommend customer-facing food service. Just do some time.
Yeah, I've been there.
It just changes your perspective on a lot of things. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, now I know how I would like to be treated out in the real world, and and how I will never treat somebody. And it's just a very good experience for people to have. Can't recommend it enough. So with all of this, right, everything that's happening so fast, what about the actual role of L&D in general? Like we've touched on it a little bit, that okay, there needs to be some different thinking, but like just the role itself. Because I'll say, for one thing, I've been trying for a while to get people to stop thinking in terms of like just the move from training to learning has been challenging, and we haven't even really made that transition, let alone from learning to true development, right? That isn't even there. So what about L&D as a role, as a function? How has that changed?
It's changed tremendously. I think you're right. I think we went, in the frontline world, we went from everybody get into an auditorium once every month, and there's going to be a trainer that comes and tries to teach you something before your shift when you're groggy, or after your shift when you're exhausted. And it's probably hard to absorb on either side of that. I think where L&D, obviously we moved on since then in most organizations, not all, but most. Where I think it needs to go is L&D has got to pinpoint strong KPI, strong ROI that they can begin to link to. And I think that needs to look at things like frontline manager pipeline. Have we internally helped develop the next cadre of frontline managers, assistant store managers, et cetera? And what are their outcomes? A lot of companies have employee engagement surveys. And one of the top items that comes up in most companies is, I don't feel like I understand what development opportunities are for me, or I don't feel like I've got those tools. If
Mm-hmm.
I was an L&D, I would say, okay, this result came in. I want my KPI to be to improve that metric the next time we do this survey. And now when my review comes up, I can say, I helped us move from here to here. And let's, by the way, see if there's been a correlation to improved employee turnover rates. That's what I would be doing as
Yeah.
somebody in L&D.
Do you know that I've done research on frontline workers in the past, and
No, great.
right next to that, I'm not sure of development opportunities or growth. Or the number one challenge they face is people who are currently in the job saying, I don't know enough about how to do my job, or like, I don't feel supported. Like, and you want to worry what's driving turnover is somebody who's, you just said, okay, go do it. And they don't feel like they've got the tools, the thing that, to help them get there. You just sort
You
of
know what?
hang it out
What you
dry.
said a moment ago, Dave, about everybody should get a job in frontline. If I was if I was the head of an L&D department, I would ask my frontline colleagues, can we come and work with you once every 6 months and do a day with you? And just to keep developing that empathy and keep like that pulse of the field and what it's really like to walk in to one of those roles for it, on your kind of, it'll feel like a bit like you're in first day again and
Mm-hmm.
having to figure things out. I think that seems to be missing in a lot of frontline organizations.
Sure. I think like we would see some outcomes down the road and be like, okay, well, why aren't
Mm.
they doing this thing that
Yep.
we've clearly laid out? And
Mm-hmm.
unless you're there, you might not know. I mean, you can ask and maybe get some feedback, but to physically see it happen or be part of it, you realize this is why, because this is the way things, work. So I would, I think that's a very important part. I mean, look, we got to be realistic, right? People don't have the bandwidth sometimes to do all that, but if there's any way possible to just incorporate some of that, I think that's so important.
Yeah, I'm certainly not saying it's easy. A lot of these things are very difficult things. Trying to transform your organization is incredibly difficult. But, and I don't mean to fearmonger, but I just, every time I open LinkedIn, I see folks in L&D and HRBP that are struggling to find new roles. And I think the way to not wind up there, and I think the way as an HR leader to help bring that bigger voice to the HR team is by doing things like this. And it's about showing your linkage to real business outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, that's whenever that conversation about seat at the table has been going on for years and years, that's what it means.
Years and years.
Yeah, it doesn't, what it ultimately means is you have to be able to show that we are part of the business, right? The things that we're doing are not ancillary to the business or something that because we are an organization of a certain size, we have to have, right? It's no, this is everything that we're doing is all in pursuit of the same thing, right? Happy customers, repeat customers, better sales, whatever it is, we're all after that. And these are all tools that help us do that. And if we get the whole organization to think about it like that, not we're doing the work, we're doing the job, and then over here I have to do my training.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're two separate things.
No, it's got to be in the flow of work.
Yeah, right. And that again, but then that also highlights the challenge of this workforce as well. The flow of work is pretty quick. They're not looking at a device or a thing regularly that's going to allow you to give them. So how do you meet them where they are? I mean, we've gotten really good at it, and there's some really unique opportunities. I think we've gotten, the whole, do we allow them to use their devices? Where I think we finally passed that conversation so we can actually start leveraging, but then mostly hourly workers. So how do we manage that when they can and when they can't access things? So it's definitely fraught with a lot of challenges, but we're getting better, but it could be so much better, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So look, let's sort of get, if you want, you can get a little philosophical about it, or we can get pragmatic, or both. But like, what are some of the things, just a couple of things, if someone's listening to this, obviously they've got an interest in the frontline space, they've got an interest in learning technology. What's something or a couple of things you'd hope they would take away?
Go talk to people in sales enablement, or do some research on what the sales enablement function looks like, and find what takeaways you could grab and bring into your HR world. That would be a big one, because I think that model, while not perfect, is a better paradigm than what I see within HR. So I think that would be one big one. I would say look closely at the framing and shape of your L&D and HRBP roles. Gosh, somebody said something that I was like, oof, the other day to me about HRBPs. They called them the hatchet men. It's Yeah, I know it sounds brutal. It sounds absolutely brutal. I think we need to find a way to help a call with an HRBP, or maybe reframed as a talent enablement role, to be a great interaction, one that people are excited to go into because they feel like this person's going to really help me make my job better, not it feeling like, ooh, I'm going to be put on a PIP or I'm going to be exited from the business when I see that name pop on my calendar. So I
Yeah.
think that we've got to find a way to reframe that role so that that role feels like a true ally, not only of leadership, but of the workforce. So I think that I would take that step back and kind of, I guess, the Michael Jackson song, take a look at the man in the mirror
Well, yeah, like
on this one.
do an audit, you know,
Do an audit.
of the interactions. Like
Yeah.
what kind of interactions are we having? And if it's
Yeah,
90% you did this wrong or we have to let you go.
that's right. And if I would give one more, go do that one day of work on the front line with your team and ask them how many different tools they have to access. Ask the frontline
Mm,
worker and ask the frontline manager. And I bet you it's more than you think. Find a way to consolidate.
yep. Yeah, I mean, even if, for me, look, I'm sitting at a desk doing this kind of work, and I already feel like I have too many things that I have to check in on. And I have the space to do that. Where if you are working on a shop floor in a store, you can't do those 7 logins
And you
in the
can't.
course of a day.
Yep.
It's just not available to you. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the other thing, right? We mentioned this before. It's like, well, look, in a world full of friction for frontline workers, where can we reduce it? Like, it's never going to be perfect, but God, there's places where we could just make it easier.
Exactly right. And minutes are millions in the front line. Minutes are
Of course.
millions. So if you're an organization with 10,000 employees and you save 10 minutes per employee, millions of savings.
Yeah. And like, not even just that, just the ripple effect of, if the employees start to feel as though they're not burdened, that turns
Mm,
into longer retention, because that all
that's
adds to, like,
right.
I don't want to, why do I want to come here if I'm
That's
constantly,
right.
it's
And
it's
happier employees, happier
it's ripple.
customers.
And something that I've found, you brought it up, sort of the development opportunities, the growth opportunities, the pathways, super critical in this space, because the jobs often are seen as transactional. Come in, do it until you're sick of doing it, and then go somewhere else, right? But I've seen so many companies who are like, day one during onboard, hey, by the way, we're going to
Yeah.
train you how to do this job. We're going to get you going. But
Yeah.
also, here are the opportunities before you. If at any time you feel like you want to go down any of these pathways, there is a path and there's a way. And here's examples. And I've even seen them go even further, knowing that these jobs are somewhat transitory in cases. They say, well, we're still going to develop you for your life. We're going to
Yeah.
give you the skills to go on and do whatever you want. And like,
Yeah.
I've
And
seen
maybe you'll come
restaurant
back.
chains,
Maybe you'll come back and do a different
they
role.
come back, or the restaurant chain will celebrate future success of past employees, and then you become that person's a brand ambassador. It, it was so great when I was there. They treated me like this. They helped me do this.
I'll shop there. I'll eat there. I'll whatever. I'll order from there.
Yeah, really
We
meaningful.
need more stories. I don't know how you feel about him, but the CEO of Walmart, guess where he started? He was a
Yeah.
cashier.
Mhm.
We need more stories like that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think that's great. The fact that we are going to end on something hopeful like that. That there's opportunity. The other thing I think is important in these for this workforce is, in the service of showing people there's a path forward, onward, upward. Don't make employees who don't choose that path feel
That's
bad.
right. That's
Right?
important
Like,
too.
you
That's
shouldn't
important
feel
too.
bad for not wanting to do that, because you should be supported. If you're happy and comfortable and content doing what you're doing, then let's support you to do that as
Bravo,
best you
Dave.
can for as long as you
Bravo.
want.
I'm with you.
People are like, oh, you could become a manager, but what if I don't want to?
Yeah.
And then you
Fair
get
enough.
ignored. Right.
Yeah. It's
So
okay to say, I'm going to go do this job seasonally for 3 months. Make that a great 3 months experience, though, for me, please.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Adam, I really appreciate your time and your insight. It's been very helpful. I like that we got into that enablement conversation. I think it is sort of the case to be made of, we're really helping to just enable everyone to do the best they can and to execute on what the vision is for the company. So yeah, good luck working with companies to wrap their heads around that. I'd like to do the same. But again, thanks for your time, and I appreciate you talking to me.
Well, my pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.